The problem with death. Before Yeshua, the penalties for sin were well known and understood in the Judaic community. The law of Moses was written down in no uncertain terms, so there could be no mistaking what was expected and required to fulfill the law. Some sins required animal sacrifice, while others required the life of the sinner. Either way, something or someone had to die to restore the balance. But let's back up a bit. There's more to the law than penalties. There are actually 4 components that make up the entirety of Yah's law, and put together, they achieve a very distinct purpose. Or at least they should. Humanity's capacity for sin, as the Bible reveals, is quite substantial, and the children of Israel were, and still are, no exception. When Yah brought Abraham's descendants out of Egypt, they were very Egyptian. They lived in the land of the Egyptians for roughly 400 years and had adapted to the customs and traditions of the locals. They still worshiped the God of their ancestors, but without clear instructions on what was acceptable to this God, their worship likely resembled the pagan customs with which they had become familiar. How do we know this? Think of the golden calf in the wilderness. These were the children of the promise, ones who were to be holy unto the Creator, and they had no idea how to worship Him properly. There was a fix, but it wasn't foolproof, nor was it supposed to be. Quite the opposite, actually. The law purged folly from the community. Its principal function was to make fools wise, but more often than not, it merely exposed the unrelenting wickedness that plagued the hearts of mankind. One of its other functions, to restore balance, was achieved by administering the death penalty. In some cases, the only way to remove the sin was to annihilate the sinner. Otherwise, the sin remained. Hence, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. Putting it succinctly, the law became a death dealer. It distributed death warrants to those who met the qualifications to die, according to Yah's ethical standards. Early church father John Chrysostom rightly explained that the law did not cause death, but simply revealed the evil that needed to be eradicated. Like Paul says in his epistle to the Romans, "I had not known sin, but by the law." But the Torah is so much more than the punishments it administers. It combines commandments, statutes, ordinances, and judgments to make up the full picture of who Yah is, His likes and dislikes. And it was given to the children of Israel to teach them how to worship, serve, and image Him. To reveal to the people of this adolescent nation who their God is and what kind of God He is. It uncovered their failings and guided them on the path to reconciling themselves with their Maker. It wasn't supposed to kill them, but was instead given to them so they could avoid His wrath. They were unclean, and the law was supposed to cleanse and rid them of their sinful behavior, if they obeyed it. That little caveat proved to be the impasse. The law works exactly as it was intended, but you have to obey it in order to receive the good things promised. Those who didn't obey also received their due wages. Thus, the ethnic cleanse that proceeded was brought on by the sinners themselves. A fatal fusion of righteous laws and the sinful nature of a people brought death as an ever-looming byproduct. Yah's law arouses the sin within every individual it reaches, and it's up to each of us to choose whether we live or die by them. Paul wrote to the assembly in Corinth to address their concerns with his seemingly conflicting guidance. Some understood his teachings to be critical of the law. They thought that he was recommending they ignore the statutes and commandments, for instance, as they relate to circumcision. That misconception carries on to this day, and the epistle has been given a much broader scope to be used as proof text for antinomianism, or lawlessness. In actuality, his focus was much narrower. It only dealt with the punishment component of the Old Covenant, which was being replaced with grace in the New Covenant under Yeshua. His argument was that the judgments kept humans bound under the guilt of sin for which the law could not atone. Since it did not eradicate the sin passed on to us by our father Adam, we remained condemned to die. Yet, we have hope in Yeshua because his death did atone for our sins and made us right with Yah once again. Before him, we would offer a sacrifice to Yah as an atonement for our sin, but there was no guarantee that forgiveness would be returned. And so, our sin and guilt stayed with us. With Yeshua's sacrifice, we are granted forgiveness and a clean slate to do things right moving forward. That means we are given another chance to obey Yah's laws. It does not mean we can live flawlessly, but this is the neo-Christian slogan. Church leaders across the globe promote grace achieved through belief in the Messiah as the way to eternal life in heaven. And while waiting on Jesus to return, church members are encouraged to live their earthly lives unbound and unburdened by the law, as this is the unmistakable mark of a Christian. The critical error here is that a key element in the plan of salvation is being disregarded as inapplicable. The measure of the human heart is in one's observance of the ethical standards of the Creator. In other words, how well we align ourselves to the image of morality that Yah has endorsed. If we take this element away, how can one prove that they belong in the kingdom of heaven and not the lake of fire? If belief in the Messiah alone is sufficient, then even the demons, who absolutely believe in him, should be expected to enter into the kingdom alongside the saints. This idea is preposterous and not at all supported in the text. So what was Paul talking about in his epistle? What issue is he addressing? Well, the problem is death. His discourse is explaining how Yah has substituted death with life, how Yeshua's dying on the stake repealed our deaths and replaced our guilt with hope of life. As long as we cease our practice of sin, we have hope of being saved from the fiery destruction to come. Obedience to the law does not bring death, and such a statement is ridiculous, as is suggesting that this was in any way Paul's position. In his letter to the Romans, he states, "For it is not the hearers of the law who are righteous before Elohim, but the doers of the law who will be justified." This is an unambiguous endorsement for the law, not against it. The law was not designed to kill, but our sinful nature transformed it to such a function. Paul said, "If it had not been for the law, I would not have known sin." This can be said another way, that, if not for the law, I would not have known I was sinful. This more clearly unveils the law's purpose: to reveal to mankind the sin that lies deep within us, and to give us control over it if we obey its instructions. This was Yah's warning to Cain, and at Sinai, he gave his people the tools to succeed where some of their ancestors failed. Their charge applies to us today. As true Christians, it is our duty to uphold the tenets of the law in the faith of Yeshua as an emblem of our citizenship. Our belief in the Messiah represents our victory over death and must be accompanied by our obedience to the law. This is the agreement. John tells his audience that those who live for Elohim should live as Yeshua did, and Peter reminds us that Yeshua was an example for us to follow. His steps were firmly guided by the Torah, so why would Paul deviate from his brothers to say that the law is no longer applicable? This would make for a truly bizarre and unconventional ministry. Nevertheless, it is the belief of roughly 3 billion people, and it shows no signs of diminishing, as it conveniently supports the popular idea that once saved, always saved. The truth is, this current world order is bound for destruction. Humans who know and believe this are desperately seeking salvation. However, when in danger, we typically look for the closest and easiest escape route, which means offering quick and easily attainable rightness with God is a lucrative business model. Evangelists have found fame and prosperity in promoting the idea that the law is obsolete, and all one needs to do to be saved is believe in Yeshua and pay tithes. What this has done is inoculated Yah's creation against the truth and binds them to their sin forever. It is spiritual genocide, and it is a real problem. There's no stopping it until Yeshua returns, so in the meantime, we strengthen ourselves in the faith of the Messiah while keeping the law as much as this current dispensation will allow.
Shalom, everyone, and welcome to Sinaitic Podcasts and Essays. My name is Dr. Arya Ben Nasik, and today we're going to be interviewing Sister Lael Bat Yisrael of NCCI Universal, the writer and reader of today's essay titled The Problem with Death. Sister Lael is also the author of The Name Above and Paul the Gentile Whisperer. She's a trained behavioral scientist, but most profoundly, a Sinaticist who has given us a little of her time today. Shalom, good sister. How you doing today?
Shalom, Arya. I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for taking the time out to, have this interview with me and the audience here. We are just loving your essays. They are very rich, substantive essays that you have designed to edify us and to glorify the Creator. I have several questions for you as I look at my list, and I'm not going to make this easy on you, okay? All right, just want you to know.
All right.
As a behavioral scientist, you see things a little bit differently than most of us. So how did your skill set as a behavioral scientist help you to construct this essay? Can you tell me what inspired you and, just talk to us a little bit about this?
Sure. And you're right. That's a good question. Behavioral science, to get involved in that, I think you have to be naturally curious about human behavior. It's not easy to look at someone's behavior and not see the basis, the catalyst for that behavior, especially when you're trained in that area. Before my training, I always, observed human behavior and wondered, why do people do these things? What makes a person act the way that they do? What makes me behave the way that I do?
Okay.
So it wasn't just always looking out. There was a lot of introspection as well. So as behavioral scientists, I think we're all naturally curious about human behavior. And when we read the scriptures, we see that it's nothing but a commentary on human behavior.
Right.
The behavior of humans that were created and given instructions. And these humans went ahead and did their own thing, even though they knew what was going to happen if they disobeyed the instructions. And so the inspiration for this essay came out of the curiosity of what makes humans do what they do, even when they know that it's going to lead to their deaths. And so the point of this essay, I think, was just trying to pinpoint what Paul was getting at. And I don't want to jump ahead. I know you probably have questions on all of this, but really just trying to pinpoint what Paul was saying.
Okay, all right. Listening to your essay, I'm hearing a profile on Paul, a profile on the law, and a profile on death. And I found it extremely intriguing to see how you interwove these three complex topics. These are extremely challenging topics to engage theologically. We're looking at Pauline thought, the function of the law, and the origin of death. So you wrote extensively on it. Here are some of the questions that I need to ask. You said in your reading that John Chrysostom said that the law did not cause death, but simply revealed the evil that needed to be eradicated. So immediately you're jumping into the law, right? Again, another complex topic. And then you use John Chrysostom, a prolific patristic and church father. I found the statement profound because it is not how neo-Christians generally understand the law. So if you could just develop for me Chrysostom's view on the law for us, in the sense that it does not kill, but shows the evil that needs to be killed. That was just profound for me. Can you help me out?
Yeah. So the thing is, John isn't really saying anything different from what Paul says. And you know what? I'll take you to Romans 7:13.
Okay.
And for those that are listening, feel free to, go to your Bibles as well, but I'll read it here, and I'm reading from the ESV. So from Romans 7 I'll start at verse 10. So Paul says, "The very commandment that promised life proved to be death to me. For sin, seizing an opportunity through the commandment, deceived me, and through it killed me. So the law is holy, and the commandment is holy and righteous and good. Did that which is good then bring death to me? By no means. It was sin producing death in me through what is good, in order that sin might be shown to be sin, and through the commandment might become sinful beyond measure." So he's saying it right there. It's not that the law, what was good, it's not that what was good killed him. It was the sin within him. Revealed by the law. Found an opportunity to bring death.
The law is exposing a parasite that's in us.
Exactly.
A parasite that's killing us. Sin is killing us. The law is not killing us.
The law is not killing us.
Because when I was in the neo-Christian church, again, probably 40 years ago, this is something that we were taught. And we were even taught this in the academy, that the law is designed to kill. You were hearing this every weekend in the academy. You're hearing this almost every day, depending on the, course. But that is the consensus from most scholars as well as pastoral theologians, that you don't want to be under the law because the law is death.
Yeah, that's just a misunderstanding of it. It's not that the law kills. The law is meant to kill the sin. But because we refuse to get rid of the sin that the law is meant to kill, we die along with it.
Wow.
I'll use an analogy here. So if anyone is familiar with ultraviolet light, an ultraviolet light is one that reveals the bacteria on a surface or any surface that is not visible with the naked eye. So you turn the lights off in your room, you put this ultraviolet light on, and suddenly everything that was there is exposed. You didn't see it before, but now you have that light. And so that's what the law is. The law works like that ultraviolet light. We don't see the sin. We don't know it's there. But when you bring the law, when you apply the law to your life and to the way that you live your life, then you're able to see, oh my gosh, this is sin.
Gotcha. Okay. I understand that. Then I'm going to segue into my next question, because you brought up in your essay that the law is a lot more than penalties. Again, this is what we were just talking about, right? When we talk about law, it's judge, kill, condemn. So you have a different position on this. You're saying that no, Aria, it's a lot more than just penalties and condemnation. So I need for you to explain that. But also, in addition to that, you mentioned that there are 4 components to the law. So, what are we looking at here? The law is a lot more than penalties, and then we have 4 components to the law. Most of our listeners only understand law, and that's just one component.
Right.
So, help us out.
Sure, I'll try.
Okay.
So, with the law, if you're just looking at the penalties, ask the question, why? Why? What is the reason for this penalty? Okay, this is the penalty for doing what?
Okay.
right? So you look at the law in parts. If you look at the law in parts, you'll see that there are 4 components, or 3, depending on how you want to categorize it.
Okay.
So let's get into it.
Okay.
The 4 components, there are statutes, ordinances, commandments, and then you have the penalties. The penalties are contingencies.
Okay. Okay.
So the main portion of the law is really just those commandments, statutes, and ordinances.
Okay.
Now, the statutes and ordinances are really just the details of the commandments.
Right.
So the commandment is do this.
Okay.
Right? Do
Okay.
X.
Yes.
The statutes and the ordinances are the details of how you do X.
Okay.
Now, where the penalties come in is when you don't do X. Or if you do X, or you think you're doing X, but you do it in the wrong way. You don't follow the statutes and the ordinances, right? So for instance, you're offering a sacrifice.
Okay.
But you're offering a sacrifice somewhere in Alabama
Okay.
with an altar that you made in your backyard.
Right. Violation of the law.
That's a violation of the law. And if you do that, then you have a penalty.
Okay.
This is where the penalties come in. So it's not just the penalties, it's about what you have to do. And if you don't do, there's the consequence.
Okay. All right. And in Neo-Christendom, most of the time is spent on litigating the consequences, right? The judgments. But no one is talking about why the judgments occurred.
Right. The why.
Right.
Where's the why?
Judgments occur because of sin.
Right.
And what is sin? Sin is transgression of the law.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Any punishment, a parent punishes their child. Why?
Yeah.
Because you broke a rule.
But
I said come home at 10 o'clock. You came home at 1 in the morning.
1 in the morning. Right. Okay. And so as a child, I should be able to do whatever I want to do. Right. If you give me a curfew to come in at 10 o'clock and I come in at 1 o'clock.
I know better than you.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to show up whenever I feel like it.
And it is also a clear demonstration of disrespect, a lack of reverence.
Absolutely.
For your position as a parent. Why would the Most High, do something different? I mean, if he is our father, if he is our parent, why wouldn't he judge us? Why wouldn't he discipline us if we disobeyed his commandments?
Correct. That's a good question.
Right. Okay. Let's see. What else do we have here? You stated that the law was given to show us how sinful we are. Can you tell me where you formed the supposition and elaborate upon it?
Sure. So one place that we can find that is in Romans 5.
Okay.
And verse 20.
Romans 5:20? All right, let's write that down here.
And it says, Elohim's law was given so that people could see, so that all people could see how sinful they were. But as people sinned more and more, Elohim's wonderful grace became more abundant.
Okay. All right. I see. So let me look at this for this now. Elohim's law was given so that all people could see how sinful they were. All right. So let me just meditate upon that. Without law, I would not be able to define sin.
Right.
Without law, sin becomes relative. It's subjective, right?
It's subjective.
I'm going to use my own autonomy to determine what's lawful, what's unlawful, what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. You're going to use your own standard. Your husband's going to use his own standard. But the Creator has given us a transcendent standard, right?
Yeah.
That no one can argue, no one can negotiate. Elohim is defining for us what is righteous and what is unrighteous, what is lawful and what is unlawful. Romans 5:20 is a home run. You stated that we as believers have been taught that we are under grace and not God's law. And I believe this is a neo-Christian position that emerges from Romans 6:14. And I wrote it down here in my preparation for our interview. Paul says, for sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under law but under grace. Yet your position from your essay defies this belief and seemingly passage. So I need to ask you, what do you mean in contradistinction to what Paul says in 6:14? In other words, it seems that you're rejecting his position or neo-Christian's interpretation of it. So can you shed some light on that for us?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Paul, and I am rejecting the neo-Christian interpretation. Mm-hmm. It's not that we're not under law. Mm-hmm. We're not under the law of sacrifices, right? Because mm-hmm. it says, if you continue reading the epistle, actually, okay, right? Because this is in Romans, 6 and 14?
Yep.
If you go further into Romans 8, mm-hmm. Verses 1 and 2, mm-hmm. Paul says, there is therefore now no condemnation mm-hmm. for those who are in Yeshua the Messiah.
Okay.
For the law of the Spirit of life has set you free from the law of sin and death.
Oh, okay.
So that's what he's talking about, the law of sin and death, where you sin and you die.
Okay. Okay, all right. I got to go back and recapture this because this is very important. My audience wants to make sure that we have perfect clarity on this. Romans 6:14, for sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under law but under grace. Mm-hmm. Your response is that Paul is saying that we're no longer under the law of condemnation. We're no longer under the law of sin and the law of death. That's the law, or the laws that we're no longer under.
Correct. Because the law has been written on our hearts, mm-hmm. right? Now that we have died in the body of the Messiah, mm-hmm. right? We're living in him now, in the mm-hmm. Spirit. Mm-hmm. We have to be law unto ourselves, mm-hmm. meaning that understanding what the law says, okay. and not just continuing to sin mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. with the interpretation that there is no law. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you sin, mm-hmm. you're sinning presumptuously. Okay. There is no more sacrifice for that.
You know what? You raise a good point. Let me open up the Bible here, because that is an excellent point. I'm going to go over to Hebrews chapter 10. And Hebrews chapter 10. And this is very interesting because this is in the New Testament. It's in the book of Hebrews.
It is.
The author says, for if we sin willfully, after that we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remains no more sacrifice for sins, but a certain fearful looking for judgment and fiery indignation, which shall devour the adversaries.
Right.
So Elohim looks at us as an adversary if we presumptuously, if we intentionally and willfully transgress his commands.
Right.
And if we do this, the author is saying there are no more sacrifices to atone for these sins.
Correct.
A sacrifice has already been made for you in the Mashiach, mm-hmm. who has now remitted these past sins. He stands as an advocate for present and future sins, but not sins that are presumptuous.
Right.
Okay. All right. And so Romans 8, 1 through 2, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in the body of Yeshua. For the law of the Spirit of life has set you free in the anointed Yeshua from the law of sin and death. And that establishes the context for Romans 6:14. Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful.
And what we also have to pay attention to here is that it's using the word sin. Mm-hmm. If we understand what sin is, mm-hmm. sin is transgression of the law.
Yes.
Which law?
Right.
If the law is no longer applicable,
mm-hmm.
then what is sin?
Right, right. What is sin? And what are we confessing in our prayers at night? And why are we asking for forgiveness?
For what? What are you measuring your standards of behavior up against?
Right.
That determines that you've sinned and now you need to confess.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. All right. I think I have one more question for you. What was the purpose of comparing demons with faith? with humans with faith. That threw me for a loop. So what are you trying to illustrate with this comparison?
Well, if you know what a demon is an angel that has chosen the path of lawlessness.
Okay.
Right? So in other words, a fallen angel.
Yeah.
Right? So it's an angel that no longer obeys the law, right? No longer obeys Yah's commandments. A human that has faith, but has chosen the path of lawlessness falls in the same category.
Okay.
So how do you distinguish yourself from a demon? If you have faith, you have faith, but demons also have faith.
Right. Okay.
But they're still called demons.
Right.
Because they're lawless.
Are you saying that we can be classified as a demon as well if we're lawless? Basically.
If the shoe fits.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So demons, angels were the first sentient beings to rebel against the Father. And I just want to make sure I have clarity here. We know that the first angel was Hallel, Lucifer, right? Rebelled against the Father. He is referred to as Satan, adversary, devil, a blasphemer. He's a demon.
The enemy.
And so when we look at all those who follow him, those who possess the same characteristics rather, they are referred to as his children. The Messiah said to the Pharisees that their father was the devil because they did the works of the devil, right?
That's true.
Okay, all right. I got you. I understand. Demons with faith, humans with faith, all right? But what separates the two are works. If you have works of righteousness with faith, then you are acceptable to Elohim. If you have works of unrighteousness, right, even with faith, then you're basically demonic.
Basically.
Understood. Understood. I'm not going to mess with you anymore, my sister. I thank you for the time that you have shared with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
You know, and I appreciate all that you do, the time that you put into writing your essays. It's just so substantive, and it allows us to reflect on a lot of things. And so I just want you to know that we certainly do appreciate you very, very much, and certainly appreciate your husband for, how would you say, lending out your talents and your skills to edify us. We want to thank you for tuning in to NCCI Sinaitic Podcasts and Essays. Once again, thank our writer and essayist, Sister Lael Bat Yisrael, for sitting down with us to help us understand her motivation for this beautifully constructed and enriched essay titled The Problem with Death. If you would like to have more information on this topic, please visit our website or enroll in our Sinaitic Light Bible Study program, which is free to you. May the blessings of Yah be with you, and let's remain focused and diligent on imaging our Father, Yah, for his glory. Praise you, Yah. We will see you all in the next episode of Sinaitic Podcasts and Essays. Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.